Hi, I'm Ryan, and today we're going to look at international relations theories. Finally, we've looked at so many different issues from the origins of human organization all the way through the French Revolution and the rise of Napoleon, various challenges to the Westphalian system. And now we're at today, where we can do international relations theory. And we'll be looking at various theories in the next several videos and applying them to real world scenarios. In this video, I want to touch on three of them. These are realism, liberalism, and constructivism. And these are overarching theories. I'm not getting into all the different types of realism, all the different types of complex interdependence, all the different ways that theorists have said that international relations is socially constructed. We're, in the broad sense, we're discussing realism, liberalism, and constructivism. I will expand on each of these in future videos. And there are other theories that we can look at. And in future videos, I will discuss postmodernism. I will discuss feminism in international politics, but not today. Keep them in mind. We will be discussing them, and they do play a role in how international relations develops. So realism. I'm breaking all of these down into four elements: the proposition, the unit of analysis, the instruments, and the main limitation. So for realism, the proposition is that self-interested states compete constantly for power and or security. We've seen this in almost every video I've put up so far. Power, security, states vying for supremacy, dominance, survival. For realism, the unit of analysis is the state. Some say it's systemic structure, that is anarchy. Man, the state, and war. War being anarchy. For realism, economic and military power are the main instruments for achieving power and security. The main limitation is that realism doesn't really account for international change. The end of the Cold War, the collapse of the Soviet Union, realists really don't get that. The transition from focusing on states as the main threat to non-state actors such as terrorists, realists really don't get that. Realism says that's ephemeral, it doesn't matter. So for liberalism, the proposition is that concern for power is overridden by economic and political considerations. The unit of analysis is, again, the state, but anarchy doesn't really matter as much. Systemic structure exists, but you can overcome it. This is, straight out of Rousseau. For liberalism, the instruments for achieving economic and political cooperation are international institutions, economic exchanges, the promotion of democracy. These are the ways that states operate, and these overcome shifts in the balance of power. Why is the United States and China not going to war right now? Liberalist theorists say it's these instruments: economic exchanges, complex interdependence. If the United States and China went to war today, what do you think all of the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies who do business with China would have to say about that? But then again, the liberalist ignorance of power is its main limitation. Realist would say, just wait. Sure, the United States and China not at war right now. Just wait. Power will rear its ugly head. Just give it time. And along comes constructivism, one of the more exotic of the three that we're looking at. Students of international relations and political science love constructivism. Its proposition is that state behavior is shaped by elite beliefs, collective norms, social identities. The unit of analysis is not the state, it's certainly not the anarchical structure, it's the individual. The method that we use to determine collective norms, beliefs, identities are ideas, social discourse. For Donald Trump, he had certain beliefs that forced him to behave in certain ways on the international stage. These were socially constructed by him, by people who he respected, by his followers, who sort of self-fulfilled many of his prophecies. For Barack Obama, it was very much the same. For Vladimir Putin, very much the same. Russia has a long history that many international leaders tend to forget about. Russia doesn't forget, and that history socially reinforced, and it determines many of the norms, the identities, the beliefs, and the behaviors of Russian leadership. But its main limitation, and this is sort of a death blow to constructivism in many ways, is that it can't predict the future very well. It's really good at explaining the past. And it suffers from confirmation bias. You see what you want to see. What you want to see is what you're going to get. That doesn't mean that constructivism is wrong, because it's not. It just means it has limitations. And overcoming those limitations is sometimes very difficult. And once again, the realist would say, just wait. You say that power is socially constructed, that anarchy is socially constructed. Well, just wait. We'll prove you wrong. So, not going to war to steal land, a normative constraint. Of course, right this very second, Russia is invading Ukraine. I'm not sure when this video will be uploaded, but it's February 23rd, 9:30 Eastern time. Russia's doing stuff that violates some of those norms. That's power. That is realism. Of course, you can be a realist constructivist or a constructivist realist. You can be a constructivist liberalist. These theories are not mutually exclusive. So let's look at an example. 9/11, the terrorist attacks in the United States on September 11th, 2001. Realists would say it doesn't matter. Terrorists do not threaten the US survival. Terrorists, the amount of power that a terrorist has, even behind the cockpit of a commercial airliner, is insignificant compared to the power of the United States as a whole. Non-state actors don't really matter. Realism doesn't make any room to acknowledge them even. And this is where realism gets very interesting. After the 9/11 attacks, the United States went to war against terrorists, and we went into Afghanistan. Realists would say, don't do that. Do not invade Afghanistan. It's too costly. The reward is too little. And the amount of power that the United States would have to sacrifice carrying out its mission in Afghanistan is not worth the tiny bit of reward that we would get for revenge against Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, and to some degree the Taliban. Realists would say it's not worth it. Get the hell out of Afghanistan. Liberalists, they don't really notice 9/11. Sure, terrorism is bad, but terrorists are not the unit of analysis. Furthermore, the liberalists would say, hey, war is interfering with free commerce. Knock it off. Let me run my business. Constructivism is a little bit more powerful in explaining 9/11. To the constructivist, the terrorist viewpoint, the United States is evil and must be destroyed. Osama bin Laden actually said that the United States was responsible for 4 million Muslim deaths, and therefore we want to kill 4 million Americans. So maybe destroyed is harsh. To the United States, after we were attacked, we said the terrorists are evil and must be destroyed. It's the viewpoint, the various viewpoints explaining the behavior. 19 people hijack planes and fly them into buildings or into the ground is due to hatred of the United States, trampling all over Mecca and Medina and killing Muslims in the process. The subsequent wars in Afghanistan and to some degree in Iraq are because of this need for revenge based off of a viewpoint that the other is evil and has forfeit its right to exist in the world because of that being evil. For both, it's a moral crusade. The moral crusade will rise again and again as we delve into constructivism, maybe even other theories. What about China-US relations? I've touched on this a little bit. It's likely that China will overtake the United States in terms of some measure of power in the future, maybe even very soon. In many ways, it already has overtaken the United States in some measure of power. Realists would say, well, war is likely. The United States, as China rises against this is China, this is the United States, as China rises against the United States, if the United States wants to survive, it will have to attack China before it gets to this, before China overtakes the United States. On the other hand, both the United States and China possess nuclear weapons. A war would be unwinnable. Realists would say the United States just has to accept the status quo. You don't start a war that you can't survive. So stay out of it. Accept what you must. Suffer what you must. The powerful will do what they will, and the weak will suffer what they must. Liberalists would say China and the United States are too economically intertwined. to go to war. War would just disrupt the flow of capital. Therefore, they don't believe that China and the United States will go to war to solve the crisis stemmed from shifts in the balance of power between the two nations. To the constructivist, major wars, including wars between China and the United States, are less likely because the international community has decided that wars violate normative principles of what it means to be a member of the international society. And wars that do occur only occur because the system allowed it to, because the norms, the community said, we are willing to suffer this war. We'll see what happens in Russia with Ukraine, but it was preventable. Put boots on the ground, and Russia is more restrained. The fact that it was allowed to happen is because putting boots on the ground may violate certain normative principles. This is highly debatable. Everything's happening very fast. So in a week, things will be different. And I'll have more to go on. What about the Iran nuclear deal? So basically, Iran halted its nuclear program in exchange for sanction relief. Donald Trump came and he said, we're going to pull out of this deal. Joe Biden came back and said, no, we're going to renegotiate it. And that's happening right now. Also, realists would say that it was irrational for Iran to halt its nuclear weapons program. Hey, the United States is not known for rewarding states that give up its nuclear weapons. Libya gave up its nuclear weapons program, and the United States helped and oversaw Gaddafi's murder. So the realists would say Iran should have nuclear weapons to balance against Israel, which also has a nuclear weapons program, and that this would lead to a stable Middle East. Kenneth Waltz, in his final paper, wrote something along the lines of why Iran should have the bomb, or why should we give Iran the bomb? I can't remember the actual name of the paper, but it's something like that. He argues that Israel already has nuclear weapons, and if Iran has them too, that they could create their spheres of influence and there will be no more fighting in the Middle East. To the liberalist, Iran wants to avoid costly economic sanctions. It wants to stay a good member of the community, free to, gobble up as many resources internationally as it can. So the benefit of giving up its nuclear weapons program is pretty high. It can make a lot of money. Iran gets more reward without nuclear weapons than with. Constructivists say nuclear weapons violate international norms. And that's why Iran would give up its program, to be in good standing with the international community, the morality of the international community. In this case, the United States, Russia, India, Pakistan, the United Kingdom, France, Israel, China, and North Korea are the quote unquote bad guys, and Iran is the quote unquote good guy. Of course, I'm probably being hyperbolic and being a little bit harsh on nuclear weapon states. And it's stretching constructivism possibly beyond its limits. The verdict of who's the good guy and who's the bad guy isn't really clear. Of course, some say that the good guy has already been established. Any country without nuclear weapons who could otherwise have them is the good guy? Again, this is debatable. It's up for you to decide. So starting in the next video, we're going to be looking at realism in depth, the science of political science. These are the authors that we'll mainly be looking at: Graham Allison, The Economist. We're going back to Morgenthau. We're looking at Jerry Muller and, of course, Kenneth Waltz. So until then, thank you for watching and have a good one.